Hello, everybody, and welcome to the preview for the Datchet Flyer this weekend, over Saturday and Sunday. We are recording this on the Friday morning, so what we're going to do is just have a look at what's going on around the UK, and then we'll kind of narrow down onto what's going on just outside of London at Datchet. So this morning we have a load of lows and it's looking really quite messy. This was at midnight, which is exactly what we've got in the atmosphere, with all of these low pressures and then the occluded front, which is these purple lines. So we've got a little low here, with a really slow moving occluded front. We got a trough just over the south coast, and 24 hours later we've got a slightly cleaner mess. So we've got another low just over the west of Scotland, and then we've got these troughs just here and just here. So this one will have passed, and then this one will start coming into effect during the day. And basically this is kind of what sets us up for the whole day, and what's dominating our kind of weather at the moment. So around a low we've got an anti-clockwise flow, and it will be going slightly inwards towards the center of the low at about 15 degrees. So what we're going to be experiencing in London is going to be a wind direction around 220 to 240 degrees, I think. I will probably correct myself when I see the graph. But all of this is gradient wind, and then it will start being affected locally by this trough. And then on the Sunday, we'll just have a quick look at that for context. I'm not going to do an in-depth forecast for it because I'll just be wrong. There's quite a big spread in the models, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we have the low that was there being absorbed into the bigger kind of picture here. It's actually just over here, but it ends up kind of being dwarfed by quite a deep low in the middle of the Atlantic. And then we've got this warm front and then the cold front trailing behind it. So this is at midday on Sunday, and off the back of a warm front you then end up in the warm sector, which means the air temperature will be warm, which will be quite nice in comparison, but quite wet. And we'll talk about that probably Saturday night, Sunday morning, and yeah, how that's going to look. So these are my numbers. So this is the raw output out of various models. So we've got the ECMWF, the Icon model, Arpège, which is a French government model, UK Met Office, and a Rome, which is a high resolution model out of the same kind of stable as Arpège. It kind of goes in order of highest resolution, so the ones that I listen to the most are on the right. And then here we've got the average wind speed in this column. This is the standard deviation of the wind speed, and then this column here is the standard deviation divided by the mean wind speed, which basically gives us a really nice average, which isn't affected by the wind speed. So for example, if you've got a 2-knot spread on a 4-knot forecast, then your standard deviation is really high, but actually your kind of average spread isn't. And then these two columns are basically my upper and lower bounds So I try to forecast within these, which is basically kind of my kind of idiot's guide to where it should be. That's kind of what I look at. You're kind of seeing under the hood a little bit. And I download these directly from the model outputs, which means that they're really accurate and you don't get all of the fluff that comes with kind of slightly more graphical models. And what we can see here is we've got a reasonably light start to the day, and then some of the models, mostly the French ones, have got this really big increase around midday. And this is really important to remember kind of ongoing. But this isn't shown in the Met Office, really. Kind of a knot or two increase versus like a 5 knot increase makes quite a big difference. And then if we just, I'm going to leapfrog a little bit. Looking at the gusts, you can see that the Met Office model has actually got everything shifted a couple of hours earlier. So it's got this sector here, but then also the gusts are still pretty big. So it's expecting slightly lower kind of base wind, but then still really big gusts. Whereas Rome has got this lighter patch earlier with that strong build matching the wind speed. And that's quite an important kind of differentiation to make. Looking at the direction, it's actually reasonably stable all day in all the models. Kind of, you know, somewhere between in that 10-degree range. And to be honest, we're going to see more local effects than actually the spread between the models. You can kind of see very similar wind directions across all of the models, and that's because we're looking at some really strong synoptic weather rather than kind of like your standard kind of like British day where you've got a lot of kind of weird thermals and stuff going on. And that's kind of demonstrated with this low standard deviation. Obviously we don't divide that by the wind direction because it's a direction rather than the speed, so we just use the straight standard deviation there. Cool. So looking at the two models, thank you to Windy for these graphics. So this is our UKV, so our Met Office output. And the important thing to look at here is actually where this rain is. Apologies, that is the Rome. And you can see that the rain is slightly later here compared to the little band of rain here. These are both taken at midday. And the rain here is the driver to the reduction in the wind, and what you get is an increase in wind speed ahead of this rain band. As soon as that rain comes, you get the drop, but you still get those big gusts. And this is the trough here, just over West Wales, and again very pronounced in the Rome model. So looking at the tables, we've got a slightly slower build, and depending on how windy this is to start with is an indicator for where the rain may start. So the rain is probably going to start about 10ish in the UKV model, whereas at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the rain starts in the Rome model. And this discrepancy here is what we're seeing here. So there's a high model variation in this gap here. But more importantly, the wind direction stays pretty stable, clocking slightly right during this whole time. And to be honest, when you're at Datchet, you will get more local effects than this, which I cannot model because it's just too complicated. And the high resolution models as well are going to really struggle to kind of understand this sort of variation and forecast with any accuracy, because that's not what they're interested in. Yeah, so it's looking like a pretty fruity day. Large gusts throughout. This base wind here is what we're kind of interested in, and where that moves relative to kind of this rain. So I've kind of backed the Arome model. They seem to be understanding what we've got a little bit better at the moment. But then you can see as the rain starts, we start seeing a decrease in wind, but also gust speed. And the closer we get to the center of that trough, the kind of messier that gets. And you'd also see an increase in variation and shiftiness on that. So just a quick preview to Sunday. So we're looking at the wind speed. Obviously, well, not obviously, but Arome and Icon don't do more than 2 days ahead, so I haven't got access to that model output yet, but nobody has, so that's fine. So arpege is expecting slightly more breeze, and I'm expecting Arome to be following a similar trend. And the Met Office is kind of expecting quite a light morning, building in the afternoon. And this is kind of reflected with the gusts as well. So arpege is kind of believing in slightly more wind, and everybody is building towards the afternoon, and I'll explain that in a second. Directionally, there's quite a big spread as well. So arpege is kind of believing in kind of like a 220, whereas and that feels very accelerated. So if you kind of transpose, so if you move arpege is 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock, then actually they look very similar in terms of speed, and that kind of translates in all of this. So arpege is kind of banking on that weather coming through early, and this is what we're seeing. So basically, this is where the Met Office thinks everything's going to be at midday. Arpege is expecting everything to be rotated round a couple hours earlier, and that's kind of about it. And that will all narrow down as we kind of get closer to the time. But actually, a 4-hour spread on a 3-day in advance forecast is actually pretty good, especially for this time of year when the atmosphere is so messy. So I have been Steve at Orcamet, and you can follow me on Orcamet Weather. You can WhatsApp me, you can email me, and or comment and like and subscribe. I will be doing the forecasting for this weekend and all the other Sail Juice series, so stay tuned.